I'm very clear. Israel must have that, does have that right to defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right.
ماشي ما عادش يقتل بالنصرة. ايوه هات.
This time the narrative is not going with the media. The people are writing the narrative, and the people are writing the narrative of humanity.
Across the world, an extraordinary protest movement erupts. A movement that promises to change the face of global politics. But not everybody protests. UK Labour leader Keir Starmer even seems to back the genocide. Why? Keir Starmer is by no means the first Labour leader to champion the cause of Israel. Support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, otherwise known as Zionism, goes way back in the history of the Labour Party. Labour commits to it 3 months before the famous declaration of Tory minister Arthur Balfour, and sticks with it for the next 100 years. In the 1930s, Labour MPs support British forces as they crush a revolt among Palestinians who fear a Jewish takeover. The British Army, helped by gangs of Jewish settlers, torture people, commit atrocities, destroy whole villages. Over 5,000 Palestinians died. In October 1938, Labour MP Josiah Wedgwood calls for the outright destruction of the Palestinian city of Jaffa to, he says, teach the Arabs a lesson. In 1948, 10 years later, Israel is set up under a Labour government. The Zionist forces carry on where the Brits left off in 1939.
During the mopping up operations, Haganah forces seek out every Arab.
The Israelis kill around 13,000 Palestinians and drive 750,000 of them from their homes. Many become refugees and will never return. For Palestinians, this disaster, or Nakba, marks the end of their centuries-old community. But for Israel, it's the beginning of national expansion. In the following years, they win military victories over their Arab neighbours and make huge gains in territory. Acquiring nuclear weapons with the help of France and a reputation for ruthless military efficiency, they become America's essential ally in the Middle East.
The security of Israel and the United States is inextricably tied, and we will never, ever, ever abandon Israel out of our own self-interest.
For the Palestinians, the future is to be refugees in another country, or second-class citizens in their own, which becomes an apartheid state. But despite it all, successive Labour leaders continue to support Israel. None of them is a keener fan than Tony Blair. In his day, arms sales to Israel boom.
Jeremy has become leader of the Labour Party.
Shake your chains to earth like dew, that in sleep have fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few.
It's only when Jeremy Corbyn becomes Labour leader in 2015 that the party's love affair with Israel is interrupted. Corbyn is a long-time campaigner for the rights of the Palestinians. The political and media establishment is already hostile to Corbyn for being left-wing. Now it discovers Labour has a major anti-Semitism problem too.
Opposition to Corbyn suddenly morphed into false accusations of anti-Semitism. Never been mentioned. It was never mentioned. I've been a member since 2006 in Brighton. Never mentioned under Ed Miliband. Never mentioned until today, almost, that Corbyn got elected leader.
The Labour Party was interfered with when it did support Palestine, when you had Palestinian flags being waved all over the Labour Party conference one year, and you had support for Palestinian statehood. The pro-Israel, anti-Palestine establishment went mad and went on the warpath.
They could tolerate, you see, a Labour leader that argues the toss about a penny on the income tax or a penny off the income tax. They could tolerate, up to a point, the domestic political disagreements within narrow confines of the prevailing orthodoxy, but they cannot tolerate anyone who challenges Britain's role in the world as an adjutant of the United States empire.
I have loved my first full conference as leader. I've really loved it.
New leader Keir Starmer sees himself as returning Labour to business as usual. He drives a witch hunt in the party, apparently to cure Labour of its alleged anti-Semitism problem.
The party went on a walkabout under Jeremy Corbyn. We have now switched the party back from weird to normal.
Past leaderships, no matter what they're about, have always allowed debate at conference, have always allowed different people to express their different points of view, but this is different and it's not like anything anyone's ever seen before in the Labor Party.
Britain must, Britain can, Britain will get its future back. Thank you, conference. Thank you, conference.
In 2023, with the Tories plummeting in the polls, Starmer is odds-on favourite to be the next Prime Minister. But then...
While I understand calls for a ceasefire at this stage, I do not believe that it is the correct position now.
Ceasefire now! 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 Ceasefire now!
That saying that there's more that unites us than divides us is really, really powerful.
He could be sitting, as I think Miliband would have been, with on the one hand, but on the other, fence-sitting approach. But Starmer decided, for inner party opportunistic purposes, to nail his colours firmly to the Israel mast. And that mast is sailing to disaster.
So when he said, Keir Starmer, I'm a Zionist without qualification, he has no hesitation in supporting a state that bombs innocent women, children, civilians.
Keir Starmer, shame on you! Keir Starmer, shame on you!
Starmer's made no bones about it. He's a warmonger. He's a pro-NATO, stand by Israel, by whatever it does, warmonger.
Keir Starmer is a human rights lawyer, and it just say one thing: if you fail to see the human rights that has been violated, just because those people are of different color, religion, ethnic group, or just live in a specific area in the world, specific geographical area, then you and the degrees that you hold, you're worth nothing.
Important in how Starmer acts, many believe, is where his new Labour Party gets its money.
Because the Labour Party have expelled many of their active members, they are in a real tight spot in terms of being able to just the grassroots stuff of delivering leaflets to people's houses. So they have become like the Conservative Party, reliant on big donors, so they can then pay for mail shots and to manipulate algorithms on Facebook.
To replace the small donations, the extra membership dues and so forth of this massive popular movement which has been expelled from the party, Keir Starmer is now relying on the same financial forces as the Tony Blairs, which is the corporate donors, which is the Lord Sainsbury's, which is the pro-Israel lobbyists as well.
He's in their thrall. He's been taken captive by the machine, and that's a very dark machine.
And I think that actually a strong Labour government led by Keir Starmer, if that's what is elected, would be a threat to world peace.
Well, the nuclear deterrent is the ultimate NATO threat, absolutely unshaken. And therefore, of course, the deterrence only works if there is a preparedness to use it.
Israel's onslaught on Gaza triggers an epic series of demonstrations.
Never stop protesting, never stop boycotting until the root causes of the violence are addressed, until occupation ends, until apartheid is dismantled. Free!
just let us be. We're two different countries and all we want is peace. And you want occupation and you want to take our country. It's wrong. It's really wrong of you.
Attacking hospitals in a war is a war crime, and they have done it repeatedly with bombs, tank shells, snipers, tanks, you name it. Nothing is off the table. And patients, healthcare workers, the senior leadership of the health service in Gaza has effectively been detained, and there's reports that they're being tortured.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
In Gaza, there is no place safe. Schools, mosques, churches and hospitals are not safe. This is the fiercest and most violent war in Gaza. Where are the human rights? Where are the international laws? And where are the countries in the world to see what's happening to us? Help us to stay alive.
Ceasefire now! 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 No ceasefire! No ceasefire! No ceasefire!
As we speak, the Israeli occupation forces have stormed Al-Shifa hospital. Tanks and soldiers are opening fire towards doctors, refugees and patients.
Just come from the House of Commons chamber, where I spoke imploring my colleagues to do the right thing tonight, to vote for an immediate ceasefire. I implored them, I basically begged them to do the right thing tonight.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
Let us congratulate all of those dock workers from South Africa to Italy, from France to the United States of America, who are saying we will not load weapons to kill Palestinians.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
But we have also come together in this beautiful city day after day and week after week and weekend after weekend, despite the government and the opposition trying to smear us.
After the most shameful period in my party's history, I am enormously proud of the leadership that Keir Starmer has shown in challenging, combating anti-Semitism and standing up for the British Jewish community.
The pro-Palestine marches, otherwise known as the hate marches, they are absolutely anti-Semitic.
They shouldn't be allowed on our streets, calling out for jihad, draping our monuments in their Palestinian flags.
They're calling for the complete annihilation of the State of Israel. They need to be called out for what they are. They are completely anti-Semitic and it should be banned in this country.
There's so many haters. We are hated so much, and it's not helped by all the propaganda that's put out, especially by the BBC.
How on earth can you trust what Hamas says, from the most basic things to the numbers that they're talking about? It's all propaganda.
Tommy Robinson, I think perhaps he hates them more than he hates the Jews. That's what I think. He hates the Muslims probably more than he hates the Jews.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Palestine!
Palestine! We need a different economy, one that doesn't depend on arms sales to Israel, to Saudi Arabia and to other regimes that oppress their own people and their neighbours. We need to replace jobs in the economy that are currently spent making weapons, and we need to replace them with good jobs, making green technology, making peaceful technology, making the technology that we need as a society in order to transform the lives of people in this country.
You know, what really hurts me the most as a Muslim is that the Muslim blood seems to be very cheap. Yeah, you look at Iraq, you look at Afghanistan, you look at Libya, you look at Yemen, right? West pays lip service. When it comes to Ukraine, all these tears come down because, you know, white-skinned, light blue-eyed.
I'm here because so many children and innocent civilians are being killed and continue to be killed, and I hate it. So I'm protesting primarily against Israel's actions in Gaza. I'm also protesting against the USA government and the UK government. It's shameful that they were the only two governments not to support the very good UN resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza.
As a Jewish person, I am so disgusted and ashamed to see the IDF instituting a Chabad house in Gaza. It is nothing less than a Chilul Hashem, a desecration of the very name of God, to weaponize and instrumentalize the ancient religion of my ancestors in the name of a very modern genocide.
Madam President and distinguished members of the court.
South Africa accuses Israel of genocide at the International Court of Justice. It's a moment of fantastic historic irony.
Israel was apartheid South Africa's closest ally. When Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, when they were asked why they criticized Israel so heavily, they said, "Why would I not criticize an apartheid state that was the closest ally of my oppressor, who ensured through the provision of weaponry, through helping South Africa and itself become nuclear powers, who ensured the longevity and perpetuation of the system of apartheid in my own country, thus our own oppression for far longer. Why would I not see them as an enemy?"
They lied and they lied and they lied. Let me tell you some of the things they said. They said the reason that so many children were killed was that Hamas employs child soldiers. They said that the reason that so many homes were destroyed were these were booby-trapped by Hamas or were misfires of Hamas rockets. They said that more aid trucks were now entering Gaza than the volume that used to enter before October the 7th. And they said that every single hospital in Gaza was a Hamas military base.
The highest court in the world, the International Court of Justice, which only adjudicates one issue, and that is the issue of genocide, has in its interim ruling, based on South Africa's submission, stated that there is a plausible risk that Israel is committing genocide. What does that mean? It means that there's prima facie evidence, which of course all of us can see on our screens every day, that Israel is currently committing genocide, and we know that that is the case. And nobody can tell me that Keir Starmer doesn't know that. He has not said one word about that interim ruling.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. 1, 2, 3, 4. Occupation no more. 5, 6, 7, 8. Israel is a state. Free, free. Palestine. Free, free. Palestine. Free, free. Palestine.
But when you look at what is being classified as anti-Semitism, it includes us. It includes the solidarity movement. It includes criticism of Israel. It includes anti-Zionism. It includes calling for an end to the war on Gaza. That is not anti-Semitism. It is cynical manipulation.
In the United Kingdom and across the globe, a shocking resurgence of anti-Semitism has exposed the lie that Israel hatred is anything other than Jew hatred. This battle belongs to the entire free world. In the name of the state and people of Israel, I thank you all. I want to thank His Majesty King Charles III. I want to thank Prime Minister Sunak. I want to thank the UK government, and I want to thank opposition leader Starmer and his colleagues.
People feel that this is wrong, and they're being told again and again by the media that it isn't wrong, that it's Israel's right to defend itself. And more they're saying, no, that doesn't sound right. 8,000 dead children doesn't sound like just defending yourself.
This is the 8th national demo, as well as thousands and thousands of local demonstrations that have been going on almost daily since Israel started the genocide against the Palestinian people.
The protests against the genocide come in many different forms.
We're just a group of skaters of all different disciplines, skateboard, rollerblade, roller skate, and we're here to try and bring our community together for causes outside of skating, and we're here for solidarity with Palestine against the Israeli occupation.
The truth is, the coverage coming out of the BBC has been part of the enabling of genocide. Because usually when people commit genocide, they hide the intent. But as we know, the Israeli state had massive intent and they didn't hide it. They talked about Palestinians as human animals. They talked about Palestinians as rats. They talked about there being no innocent people in Gaza. And this is not just any old person saying this is people from the Israeli government. But none of that was seen worthy of reporting by the BBC.
I wanted to come here for one reason only, really, which is to pay homage and respect and acknowledge the incredible sacrifice of the journalists in Gaza and in Palestine during this terrible moment. Without them, we would not know the stories. We would not have heard, not have seen the pictures, not heard the voices of the people who are being slaughtered. More journalists have been died, it's extraordinary fact, in Gaza in the last few months than in the entire Vietnam War, that throughout World War II.
I've been dealing with crime for many, many years. I've spent 5 years as the chief prosecutor in England and Wales, prosecuting criminals every day of my life.
Meanwhile, another attempt is made to get the House of Commons to vote on a ceasefire. But a spot of parliamentary jiggery-pokery gets Keir Starmer off the hook.
In the early hours of the morning, thousands of people flocked to Al Rashid Road, southwest of Gaza City, desperate for aid. Aerial footage released by the Israeli military shows crowds gathering around what looks like several aid trucks. By the time the sun rose, the extent of what happened was clear. The dead and the dying lying side by side, gunned down by Israeli fire.
In Ireland, we don't need to be told of the harm of occupation, of oppression, of imperialism. Colonists killed Irish people through starvation too, and they called it a famine then as well.
And yesterday we marked International Women's Day, and we saw politicians, journalists, intellectuals, the chattering classes all stood in unison to comfort one another about the great strides women have made. What they really mean is the progress of only some women, because quite frankly, only some women count. They will support Israel as it kills Palestinian women, starves their children, bombs their homes, dismembers their bodies and destroys their healthcare system. But then they'll wish you a happy International Women's Day.
Free, free! Free, free! Free, free! Free, free!
And the more people come, the more like the message spreads, and I think it's really important to be a part of it.
We Jews who survived all this pain, killings, humiliation and destruction, we are also against the conflation of simply being a Jew with automatic support for apartheid and genocidal Israel. It's untrue, incorrect and a lie, and it is not anti-Semitic to oppose Israel.
We are here to protest against Barclays Bank's complicity with the genocide in Gaza. There are some people who are trying to provoke us, but we shall not respond to their provocation. We shall ignore them.
The mainstream media claims the protests make Jewish people feel unsafe, but often it looks like pro-Israel groups are trying to cause trouble.
They are pathetic people. We We are not making eye contact with them. We are not making eye contact with them. Please ignore them.
In every single sector, we are imposing that they divest from apartheid, divest from genocide. Barclays is one of the biggest contributors to the Israeli war machine. They are supplying them with billions of pounds, dollars from our investments, from our money.
Sometimes pro-Israel demonstrators, far from looking intimidated as the media claim, are openly aggressive.
Cowards! Go off and rape a few kids in the dark! Go on, go back where you belong, to Rochdale! Free Gaza from Hamas!
So what? I'm a local resident. Look! I'm a local resident. I'm entitled to...
Terrorist and rapist, and you support rape of your woman. Shame on you. Shame on you for videoing you're supporting rapists. Well, they do hate them. Shame. Shame. You stand there and look at you. Shame on you.
I've been so clear about changing the Labour Party, whether it's rooting out anti-Semitism, being absolutely clear we're pro-business, pro-NATO and being fit to serve the country.
Street protests are by no means the only way people oppose the genocide. Today's BDS movement aims to do for Israel what a similar boycott campaign did for apartheid South Africa in the past.
Apartheid South Africa was changed by millions of predominantly black South Africans making their townships ungovernable by the apartheid state, bringing the economy to its knees by wave after wave of strikes, which brought enormous hardship in an already very difficult situation, and then the support of tens of millions of people around the world who engaged in the most important form of peaceful direct action, boycott, divestment and sanctions, that further plummeted the apartheid economy into crisis. And that's when the apartheid leaders realized the game was up.
Big supermarkets who stock Israeli goods, companies who finance Israel, bodies that invest in the companies that arm Israel. The boycott campaign takes them all on.
We've stopped buying products that are associated with Israel in our house. For the last 6 weeks or whatever it's been here, we just don't buy anything that's supporting this brutal regime.
Students go in for the boycott in a big way.
They have asked us, living in the heart of Western Empire, to use our collective power to break that murderous connection between the British government and Israeli genocide. From occupied Palestine and her people in exile, a call has gone out to use the tactics of boycott, divestment and sanctions to end international complicity.
The US universities see demos on a scale unheard of since the Vietnam War. But UK students, though getting less publicity, are also active.
Today, in universities up and down the country, we're seeing mass mobilisations, walkouts, sit-ins, teach-outs, occupations and rallies, and the movement is only growing stronger.
Palestine will be free! So there are school students and university students across the country who are walking out today to protest against the mass killing of the Palestinian people, particularly the huge number of children and students who've been killed, against the censorship, against any kind of solidarity with Palestine in schools and in universities. And I am in awe of the young people who, despite those threats, are taking the stand.
We just can't go to lectures as normal. We can't continue our life as normal when our government has not voted for a ceasefire. We have to be here. We have to advocate for a ceasefire, especially when our universities are complicit and they are silent on this genocide. We have to make our stance known and not stay silent as students.
The students do achieve some success. And in University College London, they get the authorities to at least talk about their demands.
But what we haven't seen, and what those of us on the staff who have been involved with the BDS movement haven't seen, is any real budging on divestment. And the response of the university to our initial pledge to BDS was to say that, well, we've looked into the investments and we've talked to our investors and we've decided that these are not problematic. And also to say, well, you know, investing in a particular technology that could be used for good or evil does not make you evil. And to us, that's not good enough. That's unacceptable. We're in the middle of a genocide, and you can't be playing around with definitions and washing your hands of these investments in that way, as far as I'm concerned.
Now it's on the books, I think we need to let it settle in. With public order legislation, you often need a bit of time and guidance.
But what do you do when you realise marches and demos on their own aren't enough to stop the genocide? This maybe?
You know, we've all tried the polite approach, talking to members of government, to parliamentarians, to military leaders, to international organisations, etc., etc., etc. And where has that got us? Into a situation where the West is not just supporting, but is actually enabling and facilitating a genocide being committed before our eyes.
The main target for direct action is the arms industry. Companies are blockaded by groups across the country. One of the most daring groups is Palestine Action.
The democratic process had been killed. When it comes to Palestine, it never really existed. And so for us, taking direct action meant going straight to the source of the Israeli weapons trade in this country, going inside their buildings, shutting them down, climbing onto their roofs, and sometimes breaking inside to destroy their weapons of war. And it was about taking the power back and being empowered to do things ourselves, rather than appealing to the same government who, for decades, for over a century, the British governments, all of them, have been complicit in the oppression of the Palestinian people.
To actually target physically Israeli weapons factories and those companies that support them, you know, that has more of an impact on trying to save lives on the ground in Gaza than polite protest and concern.
Our main campaign is against Elbit Systems, which is Israel's biggest weapons manufacturer. And Elbit Systems, when we started off, have several, and still do, have several factories, offices, and they operate in 3 different Royal Air Force bases in this country, so they're all over the place. And Elbit Systems basically have developed their whole business on the destruction of Palestine.
the state strikes back. Demos across Europe and the US are brutally crushed.
When a system is collapsing, when a system built on sand can no longer stand, can no longer survive, the reaction of those who have built the system and who continue to benefit from the system is always going to be to reduce the democratic space and to expand the militarist repressive space. This is what scares me most about Keir Starmer, is if you look at his record at the Crown Prosecution Service, which he headed for a number of years, he would always find, on behalf of the state, its agents or officials.
Starmer has already given notice that he'll back new anti-protest laws. The right to protest is under attack.
It seems to be the logic that any protest that causes political embarrassment is to be criminalized.
Protesting is a way for people to come out and talk about what's actually going on. It's freedom of speech. If you're coming and telling me that I cannot talk about what I want, I don't have freedom of speech, then what's the point of being here?
The sign needs to come off. The sign is not coming off. You can arrest me. The sign is not coming off because that is the truth. This woman's family died in the Nazi Holocaust.
Obviously, the public and the common law have the right to peaceful protest, but that could incite hate towards a specific community.
That is not hate. That is the hate to protect the Israeli extermination of Gaza. And you know what is hate? Is to assume that Jews supporting it. That is hate. That is anti-Semitic for you to even imply that Jews support this Holocaust which is happening as we speak in Gaza.
The truth. At the moment, it is 1:51 in the afternoon. I'm wrecking you for President. No, shame on you. Shame on you. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this.
I prosecuted the Director of Public Prosecution, serious terrorist, for 5 years, working with the intelligence and security forces and with the police.
This is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging, and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
Some on the left don't like George Galloway, but his by-election victory in the safe Labour seat of Rochdale offers new hope to those fighting the stranglehold of the big parties.
People only vote Labour or Tory because there actually isn't any other viable alternative. It's lesser of two evils. But there comes a point at which even the lesser of two evils, if they are the lesser of two evils, have become so evil that people can no longer stomach it, can no longer tolerate it. And if someone comes along, as we have here, who's clearly viable, people are ready to get behind it. Independents will emerge all over the country who will challenge Labour, lose Labour seats, and maybe even capture some Labour seats. So we need popular power behind a radical political force, party or coalitions of parties, that not only means it, but has the means to deliver it.
Labour sees a large-scale rebellion in its ranks. Many Labour councillors go independent, while others, including numbers of ex-Labour MPs, now plan to stand for election to Parliament. Palestine will be a major plank in their campaigns.
And in November, when there was a ceasefire motion that went through the House of Commons, the main parties whipped their members to vote against that. And from that point, our movement said very clearly, no ceasefire, no vote. Every time they want to launch a war, there's always money for the bombs, there's always money for the aircraft, there's always money to give to Israel or wherever it is. They have money for war. Well, we don't want money for war, we want money for welfare, and we want money for ordinary people's needs.
4 months ago, I had no ambition of having the letters MP next to my name. As I said, I've never even been a member of a political party. I went to speak along with 25 of community members to the incumbent John Ashworth, a Labour shadow cabinet minister with a 22,000 majority. To my shame, I begged him. Some people asked him, some people shouted at him. I begged him for one thing, because God forgive me, by that stage, only 5,000 innocent men, women and children had been murdered. And all I asked of him was, I want you to ask for is an immediate ceasefire. An immediate ceasefire, nothing more, nothing controversial, just an immediate ceasefire. You are representing a community, like has been said before, 71% of which wanted that. We gave him 72 hours to respond. He did not respond.
Everybody feels nervous under Starmer and feels like they'll get kicked out of the party. And so we get this ridiculous situation that any attempt to put a motion, for example, around Gaza will not be allowed, and anything which is critical of the leadership won't be allowed. And I resigned because of the democracy issue. But also there was no way that I could stay in a party where I wasn't allowed to speak about what was happening.
A group of us within Hastings Labour group, there was 8 councillors out of 14 who went independent. And that was just before Christmas, but there were lots of reasons. We were being pushed around by the Labour Party. We were being told what we should do in terms of our policy at Hastings Borough Council by people who had never, ever visited our town, let alone had any idea about what was going on. We've had a parliamentary candidate inflicted upon us. So this is what Labour are doing. They're selecting their candidates and they're wiping the floor to ensure that candidate is selected. So what you're ending up with is a slate of members of Parliament in the next general election who are just going to be yes people to Keir Starmer.
Most famous of all independent left candidates is former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. He'll stand in Islington North, where he's been the MP since 1983.
The British Parliament should be the first in the whole world to declare there is a climate emergency.
Stop the pumping of British arms into Saudi Arabia and every other conflict within the region.
With 4 million children living in poverty, the very richest people in Britain have seen their personal wealth double in the last 9 years.
You can't cut your way to prosperity, you invest your way to prosperity.
If we don't get a ceasefire here, the war goes on in Iran, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, in Jordan, in the Red Sea, in the Mediterranean. We are the voice for peace.
From the very beginning, he's been a constant, tireless presence in the campaign for the Palestinians.
Since we announced the 28 billion, the Tories have done terrible damage to our economy, not just the Liz Truss budget, but also now the government briefing that it's going to max out on the government credit card.
There is genocide, and there is ecocide, the death of the planet from fossil fuel use. Israel and its supporters are enabling both. Not only does Israel get its natural gas from the Mediterranean Sea, including the 1999 reserve found off the coast of Gaza, but the UK government has awarded it North Sea oil licenses, giving Israel a significant stake in the North Sea oil sector.
When the Palestinians get to return to their villages and towns along the coast, what does that matter if it's all underwater? Or if Gaza becomes free, what if it's completely desalinized?
Keir, I'm a Labour Party member and I'm also part of Green New Deal Rising. Are you going to be committed to the 85 billion? Will you examine the impact?
Sorry.
Young people Which side are the Labour Party on?
We are on the side of economic growth. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right now.
The UK connection between fossil fuels and genocide runs even deeper. British imperial designs on Palestine began as far back as 1840, coinciding with the very beginning of large-scale fossil fuel combustion.
That practice was, of course, born in the UK. It reached other parts of the world through the vehicle of the steamboat, a ship powered by coal, and more particularly through the armed steamboat, a ship with cannons and other weapons on it powered by coal. The first time such a boat was deployed on the battlefield and played a decisive role was in 1840 on the coasts of Palestine. On 1st November 1840, a squadron of 4 British steamboats reached Akka, and when the Arabs rejected the summon to surrender, they began bombarding the town. Massive shelling went on for 2 days. It was the war that broke Muhammad Ali's project of turning Egypt into a modern industrial state and inaugurated a century of British colonial control over that country and the Middle East, more generally. It was the war that marked the beginning of the globalization of large-scale fossil fuel combustion, and it was also the war that gave birth to the idea of sending Jews to colonize Palestine on behalf of the West.
Gaza has played the role of effectively removing the scales from people's eyes about a number of things, about the real nature of the State of Israel, about the reality that the State of Israel doesn't speak for all Jews, because so many Jews in so many parts of the world, including Israel itself, are protesting against its indefensible slaughter of tens of thousands of innocent Palestinian people.
It's really important for people to realize just how powerful showing up and having a voice really is, because it has a cascade effect. If you've got the courage to say what you really believe without fear, someone else who believes the same thing then doesn't feel so much fear to say that, and then more people realize that there are like-minded people, and like-minded people can form movements.
That given the anger, the frustration, the hurt, the distress, the pain that people in this country are feeling not heard, feeling locked out, feeling not represented, can we harness that in an electoral context, given that this 2024 is a general election year? And the answer from the people of Rochdale has been a resounding yes.
Palestine is the moral compass of the world. So when you lose that path, then you're on the wrong side of history.
Keir, how many more children in Palestine have to die before you call for a ceasefire?
Keir Starmer, you are facilitating Israel's genocide in Gaza. Stop the killing of children. Stop the massacre of over 7,000 babies. Freedom for Palestine. Stop the genocide. You're responsible.